morning. My name is Michel Paul Richard, and I'm going to talk about my memoir entitled the same name. It was published by an outfit named Storyworth, which specializes in memoirs. It was commissioned by my daughter-in-law, Kari Oxberg, without my knowledge or consent. She is half Swedish like me, and she's also been to Sweden like me, so how could I refuse? My wife, Peggy, who has been with me for 40 years, had to do all the word processing, so I want to express my gratitude towards her. And the format used by Storyworth is designed to look like an interview. Every week they would send a new question, and you have the option of answering the question, or modifying the question, or ignoring the question, or writing your own question, and I did all of the above. The book is 186 pages. 67 pages are artwork, sculpture and painting, and more about that later. The first question has to do with parents and grandparents. Who were they? Where were they from? And what interaction did you have with them? My father was born in South France. He was about 60 years of age when I was born. He enlisted in the French army and served in the cavalry in Tunisia when he was 17. And when he was discharged after 4 years, he decided to follow in the footsteps of his father and become a minister, Protestant minister in South France. He married soon after a Dutch woman named Wilhelmina van Oosting. They had 5 children in a very short time, but the marriage ended in divorce when he took up with the person who became his second wife, who was a Jewish mystic, Mira Alfasa, and they went to Pondicherry, and they were there for several years with an Indian mystic whose name was Aurobindo Ghosh. He was hiding out from the British. There was a warrant for his arrest, and he was in Pondicherry for many years. Anyway, he and my father worked on a program called Aria, which was also a publishing company. And that sojourn was interrupted by World War I. My father, who was in the Army Reserves, in the cavalry, was recalled, and they went back to France. In 1914, when they got there, he was asked by the immigration authorities, "Where is your passport?" He said, I don't believe in passports. They said, you can't come into the country without a passport. He said, okay, I'll go back to India if you don't want me. They said, wait a minute, we'll work this out. So he reported for duty. He was in the French cavalry. They still had a cavalry in World War I. And he was training horses and cavalrymen until a few months before the end of the war, at which time he was discharged with a heart condition, heart murmur, and they decided to return to India, despite the submarine warfare and the risk of being torpedoed by the Germans. They both slept in their clothes, ready for a hasty departure if the ship was torpedoed. And they got back to Pondicherry, where they resumed, or Mira met Aurobindo for the first time. My father resumed his relationship with Aurobindo, working on the magazine called Aria, which was an anti-colonial publication. And this trip ended badly because his second wife, Mira, decided to stay in Pondicherry with Aurobindo, and my father was outraged by this development. There was a violent scene, and he left and went on to the Himalayas in India and spent 2 years in seclusion, after which he returned to France, and I was going to mention that after a brief time in the ministry, he decided to go into law, and he was assigned to the Court of Appeals in Paris. And while there, he was sent to French Guiana, Devil's Island, to make a report on conditions. And then, as I said, the marriage with Mira broke up, and finally, he decided to go to the United States. And one of his sisters, Jeanne, when she was informed of this plan, said, "He is going to America, but why? He has done nothing wrong." So that was the attitude of French people about the United States. And actually, I looked up my genealogy, and I have a lot of Swedish relatives whom I don't know living in the States, but no French relatives. My half-brother René immigrated to Canada, and the other half-brothers, maybe I'll talk about them later. When my father came to America, he was on a lecture circuit, and he married a woman named Linda. That was his third wife. and they published a book together called The Scourge of Christ, which was published by Knopf and translated by his third wife, Linda. And at a certain point, he met the woman who was to become my mother, Virginia Stromborg, and she came to one of his lectures. His English was not very good. I should say his accent was not very good. His English was understandable, but in any case, they met when she attended one of his lectures. And I'll tell you more about her in a minute. My mother was the offspring, the eldest child of Swedish immigrants who settled in Chicago. My grandfather was a Swedish carpenter. He built houses all over the south side of Chicago. His name was Gottfried Stromborg. His wife was Milda, and she was a housewife. And my mother was born in 1904, the first of 6 offspring. At the age of 12, she was taken out of school to take care of her little brother Melvin, and so she had no education, no formal education beyond the 6th grade. She was also sent at some point to stay with an aunt in Kankakee, and apparently at this time she was able to attend secretarial school, and when she and 2 of her sisters, Eloise and Vivian, left Chicago and went to New York, she went with them, and by a stroke of good fortune, she met Arthur Bunker, who was the chairman of the board of Lehman Brothers, and she became his personal secretary, which was amazing given the fact that she had no education. And that was also, I think, one reason why she was attracted to my father, because he was an intellectual companion, and she was starved for that kind of companionship. The problem was that after he left his 2 careers, first as a minister and then as a barrister, an attorney, he had no visible means of support. His lecture series came to an end, and so she was the main source of income. In fact, the only source of income, except later on he had a couple of part-time positions, one during the war at the United Nations as a translator, and later on he served in a temporary capacity at 2 colleges teaching French and philosophy. So the situation was completely on her shoulders as far as the source of income was concerned. My father was a very difficult person to live with. At one point, Arthur Bunker gave her money to buy a house somewhere in New York. And my father took the money and bought a chicken farm in the Poconos, along with plow horses and a full-time custodian administrator. And this is what she had to put up with. In addition to that, he shocked several of her sister's friends. We used to take trips to New Jersey at holiday time to be with my mother's sister, Vivian, and her husband, Robbie. And on one occasion, one of the guests who was sitting next to my father said, "Would you like some gravy, Paul?" And he said, "Do you know what is gravy? It is a kind of thick juice which comes from the grave." So this is what my mother had to put up with. The fact of the matter is that he was, ever since he left the French army, he was a vegetarian because he said the food in the army was terrible. On one occasion, I said to him, "Father, you've been a vegetarian since you left the army, but I saw you eat a hot dog on the Staten Island ferry. Why did you do that?" He said, "To show that I'm not rigid." Anyway, he was a handful, and for some reason, and that was probably the reason why she decided that I would be sent to boarding school at the age of 8. And I never forgave her for that, because to me it was like a childhood abandonment. A child needs a mother more than they do a father. More about that later. Because Storyworth, the publisher, helped me to resolve that problem. In the writing of it, I changed my opinion of my mother, and I'll talk about that later. I think I mentioned that his third wife, Linda, refused to give him a divorce, so he and my mother were never married. You could call it a common law marriage. You could also say that I was a bastard, but don't call me one, or you'll pay for it. As far as my upbringing was concerned, my father was the main source of discipline because my mother was away at work. And although he coddled me, actually he didn't coddle me, he was a strict disciplinarian, and his motto was spare the rod and spoil the child. I escaped a caning on more than one occasion because I could run faster than he could. But he did dote on me. He helped to send me to, he forced me to skip 2 grades in school, and he managed to send me to the University of Chicago when I was just turning 15. As I said, his English was not very good, and I was forced to be the translator on frequent occasions. I remember once my mother sent us to the grocery store to buy frozen spinach, and on the way, since I was wearing jodhpurs, as he insisted, a truck driver yelled out the window, "Hey kid, where's your horse?" When we got to the grocery store, my father said, "Have you any frozen peanuts?" And the proprietor said, "Sorry, Pops, we don't got no frozen peanuts. Maybe next week." So this is how it went. I should say something about my grandparents. The ones that I met were Swedish immigrants in Chicago. We used to go to Chicago in the summer. We'd take the train from New York and spend a few weeks there. And I never met my father's parents. They were dead long before I was born. My grandparents had been Lutherans in Sweden, but the Lutheran Church was too liberal for them, apparently, because when they went to Chicago, they joined a group called the Moody Bible Institute, which was a fundamentalist organization. My father had more than one conversation with my grandfather about religion, and on one occasion my grandfather lost it and said, "Thank God I'm not an atheist," which my father thought was terribly funny. When I was in boarding school, all the kids thought that my father was my grandfather because he was actually older than my grandfather. And the first time I made a painting, it was of an American Indian. My roommate said, "You didn't paint that, your grandfather painted that." I said, "My grandfather never painted anything. He's a Swedish carpenter." My grandmother used to give me bars of ivory soap when we went to Chicago, and she'd tell me to carve either a donkey or an elephant, possibly because we had relatives on both sides of the political aisle. So maybe that's how I got my start in sculpture, carving big bars of ivory soap. All right, so this brings me to the point of entering the University of Chicago. I forgot to mention that in high school in Brooklyn, I had an intermediate algebra teacher who was extremely aggressive. And when she used to write on the chalkboard, it sounded like machine gun bullets. Anyway, she prepped us for the Regents exam in intermediate algebra, and she must have done a good job because I got 100 on the Regents in intermediate algebra, although I was not very good in mathematics apart from that. And that's how I got into the University of Chicago when I was just turning 15.